Now, obviously, we're going to stick in the Eastern Conference here. So the Florida Panthers, when the season started, they were the best team in hockey. I don't think anyone on the planet was going to touch them the way they were going. Obviously, the Kyle Beach story came out. They lost Quenneville as their coach, and they've slowly started to show a lot of cracks in the armor since then. Are they going to go back to being a dominant team, or do you think that the coaching staff had a lot to do with it?
They're a dominant team still.
Well,
they are still a dominant team, but they don't look nearly as good as they did 2 weeks ago.
They're 11-2.
I think more so. I think more so for the Panthers, it's how long is Alexander Barkov going to be out? You know, he got banged up the other night. I think it was a lower body or a knee injury. They think it's just going to be a couple of weeks, no surgery needed, and maybe he's not out too long. But there's not an element of the game that guy doesn't do incredibly well in all three zones, offensively, defensively, face-offs. He's the first guy over the bench on the power play. He's the first guy over the bench on the penalty kill. Up a goal, down a goal, first minute, last minute of a game. You take that guy out of your lineup, you're going to most likely struggle in some form or fashion. So how do they rally with him out? That, to me, is more so the coaching change did have an effect, absolutely, because you could see Joel Quenneville's imprint on that team, getting them to where they needed to be. I think Andrew Brunette is certainly capable of continuing that growth, continuing what they had there under Quenneville. But to me, it's what happens now with Barkov out. That division is very competitive. You know, Toronto looks like they're getting hot. Tampa Bay is still Tampa Bay. Boston probably has a run in them. They've won 2 in a row. You know, how can they hold off the teams that are going to start nipping at their heels now as they smell a little blood in the water with Barkov out?
I'm watching, by the way, I'm watching this Knick game, and Cole Anthony said something to R.J. Barrett. You saw that he didn't like what he said. He smiled at him, said something you could see, read his lips, and then he walked up and gave him a pound, but not a really happy pound of what he said. I don't want to say it on live air, but it didn't look
a little
really
Duke
good.
North Carolina rivalry.
It didn't look really good.
Even though they didn't play against each other.
Anyways, we are talking to NHL.com Deputy Managing Editor Adam Kimelman. Now, Adam, a couple more questions for me and us, and first of all, I would like to get into a lot of questions with you, but we just are short for time. We were just talking about the Islanders, okay? And it bothers me, and we will get into the Islanders that have really bothered me so far this year, and Boston, another team that I thought is still believe. I know it's early in the season. I think both teams are going to be fairly competitive teams all the way to the end. The Islanders, what really bothers me is how could the Islanders agree? I understand their stadium's not opening up, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show because I think the Islanders really put them in a situation where they're going to start the season really chasing these teams. And you don't want to chase in the NHL because when you fall behind like 10, 12, 13 points, the Islanders have done it before, but it's a significant haul to catch those teams. This team hasn't had a home game. Really, for the first three and a half weeks of the season. They're not going to be playing a home game until next week, which will be 4 weeks into the season where they didn't have a chance to play a home game. Do you think this has affected the Islanders' game and the play of this team because they had to travel so much so early in the season?
I mean, look, you start 13 games on the road. You're in and out of hotels, airports. You don't get a chance to – I know they got a couple of days in between where they got to go home in the middle of it, but those are 2 really, really long, hard road trips. And when they get in, it's a strange building. Mm-hmm. It's going to be almost like another road trip.
That's what I said.
When they open up UBS Arena, because they haven't really skated there yet. They haven't played there yet. So there's still going to be some time to get used to the new building. I think it's going to be great. I've seen pictures of it. It looks fantastic. I can't wait to get out there and catch a game there. But I just, and you're right. It is going to be difficult for them to make up that ground, right? I think it could be worse. Mm-hmm. 13 game road trips. They still came out with 12 points. Not ideal, less than 500. Mm-hmm. However, I think there are some good things. I think getting home, getting a few days off here, getting ready for Saturday night and getting Saturday night and the opening behind them,
right,
just so they can move in and be like a normal season, I think is going to be good for them. And look, I will never doubt a Barry Trotz coach team run by Lou Lamoriello. Are they more built for the playoffs than for an 82-game regular season?
Yes.
For sure. Am I going to say, well, they're done, they're not going to get in? I won't say that.
No.
Now. There's too much hockey to be played. Too many smart people there. Too many good players. Look, losing Ryan Pulock doesn't help them. They're going to have to, figure out some ways to get some better play out of some defensemen there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's time for Sebastian Aho to step up. Maybe it's time for Noah Dobson to show why he was the 12th player picked in the draft. He already has a little bit. Maybe it's time for him to get a bigger bite with Pulock out. But I think there's a lot more to come from the Islanders.
So another, speaking of new ice, Jack Eichel getting traded to the Vegas Golden Knights. He's not going to be playing for a while following the neck surgery that he's going to be having. So do you think this is the best that Buffalo could have gotten for them at that point? Or do you think they sold short on Eichel? And what do you think, does this make Vegas the favorite in the whole NHL?
Well, just to answer your last question first, I think that was the one thing they're lacking. When Vegas is fully healthy, that's the one thing they didn't have. They didn't have that legit number one centerman. And I know William Karlsson scored 40 goals a few years ago in their first year, and that was great. But, he's not a number one centerman. Jack Eichel is, when healthy, a top 10, top 15 player in the league and an absolute franchise number one center. And when he gets healthy, the thought of Stone, Eichel, Pacioretty as Vegas' top line must make every Golden Knights fan in the world just drooling with anticipation. It's going to be another few months before we get there, but they got to get some other guys healthy too. They got to get Stone back in the lineup. They got to get Pacioretty back in the lineup. They got to get Karlsson back in the lineup. And I think there might be one or two other guys I'm missing because they are pretty beat up right now, and they're just sort of treading water in that Pacific Division, trying not to let too many teams get away from them. But I think once Eichel gets in and gets his legs under him, I think that they have a chance to be an incredibly dynamic team. And was that trade the best Buffalo could get for them? I mean, look, Alex Tuch is a guy with 20 to 30 goal potential. Peyton Krebs, already showed in the flashes of being a top-end player when he was in Vegas between, going up and down between the NHL and the Western Hockey League. He's going to eventually get a full-time spot and a prominent spot in Buffalo when they feel like he's ready. He's gone down to the American League, and he's played very well there. And you got a couple of draft picks. So you got some help for the present. You got some help for the future. And more than anything else, no one in Buffalo is asking about what's going to happen to Jack Eichel anymore. You removed that question from the equation. And I hate to call it addition by subtraction, but just from that point of view, just from those guys not having to hear on a daily basis what's going to happen when Jack gets healthy, I think that's going to help that Buffalo team immensely.
So we'll talk about, since we're talking about Buffalo rebuilding basically with the trade of Jack Eichel, the Pittsburgh Penguins have been kind of teetering on this rebuild. What do they do? Crosby's time as a prominent player is at its end or beginning to be at its end, depending on how long he wants to play. Is Pittsburgh going to blow this thing up this offseason or during the season?
Well, I don't see them blowing anything up at
Really?
any point. I
don't think so.
The impetus has always been, at least from everything I've heard on the outside, is to, sign Malkin, sign Crosby, sign Letang, keep that group together. They're still, look, Crosby's had about the worst luck you can possibly have. He has the wrist surgery, thinking he'll finally solve this problem that he had, thinking he'd miss 3 or 4 games at the beginning of the season. It became 8 games, plays 1, then he gets COVID, then he's out another 10 days. So, he just must be chomping at the bit just to get back on the ice. Malkin, is starting to skate. He's starting to ramp up a little bit. It's going to be another probably 3 weeks before we see him back in the lineup. And Letang, when healthy, I still think is a top 10 defenseman in the league. So everything sort of goes off those guys. And yes, I understand they're 30 plus and it's a league where everybody's getting younger and faster, and those guys are getting older and probably a little bit slower. But again, much like we talked about with the Islanders, I'm never going to doubt a Sidney Crosby team. I've seen Sid play in a lot of different situations over a lot of years. I still think he can be a top-line guy, top player in the league, and I think he is still more than capable of dragging that Pittsburgh Penguins team into the playoff contention. I don't know if they're a Stanley Cup team, but can they get in? Absolutely.
Adam, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Tell the fans how they can find you on social media, and we'd love to get you on again to talk hockey. Especially, I didn't realize how much you know about the full NHL. I know you're a writer mainly for Philadelphia, but you have so much that you could give to our fans, our hockey fans, some of the information that they probably are now going to definitely follow you, obviously, because you're very very good and really gives us in-depth analysis of what's going on in the NHL. So thank you. Tell the fans how they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at NHL Adam K, and I also have a podcast where we cover, myself and Mike Morial, my colleague at NHL.com, we cover the draft, NHL Draft Class. That's available, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts from. But yeah, and all my stories pop up on NHL.com, and I'm pretty good with answering questions. Anybody asks me on Twitter, it's at NHL Adam K. So yeah, anybody who wants to send me a question or look me up on there, that's the best place to find me.
Adam, thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. I'll have Speedy reach out to you again, probably in the next couple of weeks, and we'll set you up another show because we'd love to talk more hockey with you.
Sounds good, guys. Anytime. Thanks for having me on.